Welcome to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that uncovers what you don't know about your food, one bite at a time. And sometimes, like today, we step off of the dinner plate to the flower vase, to the lavender-scented pillowcase that eases you into a restful sleep. But the concepts and the tentacles that reach from a small farm into your life are long and strong. Like last week's episode about a small sheep farm in Ohio, we are on the farm again, and here is what you need to know. Every fall, the For Farmers movement opens up the opportunity for you to nominate your favorite farmers for grants. It's intended to spark that connection between you and your farmer. It allows you to help them feel seen and appreciated for their hard work. But it has another purpose too. It is permission giving and encouraging to our small farmers who work so hard to feel like applying for a grant is possible. And so they do. The applications are easy. The review process is grueling. And at the end of the day, For Farmers selects farmers and farms for grants that have a real impact. Vista Farms and Valerie Timm from outside of Boise, Idaho, were one of last year's recipients. They had lost 10% of their lavender crop, not terribly unusual in a dry climate on a small farm, and the grant helped them to recover that loss. There's one other observation about the For Farmers grantees as a whole, 75 of them in 33 states from Alabama to Alaska and from Texas to Maine, that I want you to see. When you take a 35,000-foot view of them, this is what you see. Families working together. They live close to the margins financially. They put what they earn back into their small farms. They care about the land, about healing the soil. To them, regenerating the land is not a buzzword. It's a lifestyle. They grow and sell diverse vegetables, like heirloom tomatoes. They save seeds and trade them with their fellow small farmers. They raise beef and pork and chicken on pastures. They are consumed with showing respect to these animals and are known to exceed organic and humane standards because that is just who they are and how they operate. That is what I see when I look at this group. And it's not because any of that is required. It is because it is what small farms do. And it is completely remarkable in the face of industrial agriculture's deep, dark shadow. Small farmers are radical in the face of monocrops and soil inputs. When you meet Valerie and the other small farmers that grace One Bite is Everything from time to time, they will not sound radical at all. They are kind and thoughtful and often quiet and unassuming. But make no mistake, when you meet a small farmer, you are in the company of a revolutionary, one that needs our support in all of our actions. Shopping locally at your farmer's market is a good one, and nominating a farmer for a For Farmers grant is another. Mark your calendar for October 12th, National Farmers Day, every year. Enough of that now. Here's Valerie.
My husband, Alex, and I are first-generation farmers, and we started our lavender farm we bought the property in 2021, and it was right after the whole 2020 situation, not to take us all back there to a dark place, but it was really transformative for us in kind of deciding how we wanted to live our lives and being way more intentional than we were. We were very much on a kind of corporate job, bought a neighborhood house. We were lovingly renovating it. We were set in that kind of lifestyle. And then realized, gosh, if this grocery store disappeared or didn't have food in it, what would we do? We don't have a way to produce for ourselves at all. And so we started looking for land just to have more space, not necessarily to start a farm, but just to have a little bit more space. And so that led to where we are now. We have a 40-acre piece of land in the high desert, just out of Boise, Idaho. We feel very fortunate to have been able to acquire it. It was a very competitive process at the time in real estate in the market out here. So we had to be really aggressive, and we had to make that decision very quickly. So we didn't go around looking for a farm and finding the perfect piece of land. We found, luckily, a beautiful piece of land and just kind of started. And so that led us to becoming a lavender farm because we don't have a lot of water out here. We get about 10 inches of rainfall a year. There's no irrigation. We don't have an agricultural well. And so we really have to water everything that we're doing off of our own domestic well for our home, which is about 550 feet deep. So I have a lot of gratitude for that well. You got to go pretty far out here because we're in the desert and it's really windy. It's hot, it's dry. And so crops don't do as well in the wind at 30 miles an hour sustained all spring and summer. And so lavender has been the perfect crop for us because it is drought tolerant and it handles the wind well, it handles the heat. And we loved that it was perennial and we can see it come back every year and get bigger and just really thrive in our desert environment. So that's kind of how we landed on lavender, just because it has the right conditions for the land that we have. And it's so versatile. You can use it in so many different ways.
So are you doing value-added products in addition to the lavender itself you're selling?
So we planted in May of 2022. And this summer will be the first year where it's technically reaching full maturity. So it takes about 3 years to establish the plants. We bought 2-inch plugs and planted 2,500 plants by hand. Took a week or two off work and did that with the help of some very sweet friends and family to get that on about an acre of land in our front yard. And so what we do with the lavender is if we don't harvest all of it for fresh bouquets that go just to people that come out to pick it or to florists in different areas, little shops, we'll dry a lot of the lavender. And then we have dried bundles that we can sell throughout the year. But there's so many things that we can do with it kind of as value add. And we're still on the beginning end of exploring all of that. There's a lot of culinary uses for it. So we can put it in teas and have herb blends, cookies, ice cream. We've worked with a local ice cream maker here. That's been amazing. And we've been able to use them for just sachets that you would put in your drawers or your car to make it smell good. There's a lot of different uses in bath and body products. And then we also distill the lavender with the still that we got. And it's really a cool process, steam distillation, to then create the essential oil. And then that can be used in a lot of different products too.
Amazing. It is very versatile. And when you're making an essential oil, isn't it a tremendous quantity of the plant that you need to make a teeny amount?
Yeah, we did it for the first time this summer. And so I don't have the numbers on how many plants you need to make the little bottles of oil, but it is a really big quantity of the plants. And we only got one of our distillations in this year because we learned that the wind dries our plants out really quickly. And so we found that for just my husband and I that both work full time, being weekend warriors trying to harvest 1,000 plants was not sustainable. So it was our pre-production year. So this year going into it, we know that we need a lot more help and we need to start a lot earlier in distilling. So we'll kind of get a better rhythm down to understand how many plants we truly need to create those small bottles, but they smell wonderful. It's a really fun process.
So you're selling, you said, to florists and to shops, and where else are you selling?
Yeah, so our main goal is to have more agritourism and have people come out to the farm and really invite the community to be in this environment. We have beautiful mountain views all the way around, and there's nothing like seeing the lavender in bloom with these beautifully vibrant purple fields and just being there to stand there and smell it and just take it all in. It's very, very tranquil and relaxing. So that's really our primary model, is to invite the community out here to see the lavender farm.
This past July, Vista Farms welcomed over 1,000 people to the farm for a day of everything lavender, for a real community festival. The farm is also open during the season for you-pick experiences, besides on Festival Day. But lavender's not all that they do. Vista Farms also offers responsibly raised meats and eggs.
And then we have beef cattle, and we have pigs, and we have chickens. And so little kids especially love to come and see the farm animals and interact with them and just really get the full farm experience. And so that's kind of our primary. And then we'll be working to make more products that would be available here on the farm. So we just did some soap with our pig lard and our lavender essential oil. And that was really an amazing experience just to see all of the products that you right there on the farm make tangibly in a soap that we can start to use. So we're kind of building all of those things out now, and we have so many ideas. We have to focus on which ones we want to start with and then expand from there.
I experimented for the first time with tallow. I definitely like it with the scent.
Absolutely. Whip tallow is really popular now.
Yeah, I think people are getting more interested in knowing the ingredients in everything that they have.
Yeah, and beef tallow was used a lot in beauty products originally, and we've just kind of moved away from that. Same thing with, even French fries being cooked in beef tallow or in lard, and that's how it was done. So I think a lot of the customers that we interact with that come to our farm want to buy lard and want to buy tallow and make it at home and use it in their own products, which is awesome.
I'm curious about the agrotourism in your area. Is there special permitting that you need for people to be able to come to your farm? And I don't know if they're paying to come or, purchasing off of your land, or what are the requirements?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're actually going through that process right now with our planning and zoning for our county. And it's interesting. Idaho is a very agricultural state, and we are in Ada County, which is where our capital is for Boise, Idaho. But there aren't a ton of agritourism farms out here. And so there's really no planning and zoning definition for agritourism or having people come out to your farm. There's a farm stand, which I think can be about 600 square feet, or you can have a social hall, an event space. And that's really more geared towards a veterans lodge or a wedding venue or something like that. And so farms don't really fit into either of those definitions for agritourism. But we see a lot of flower farms and you-pick farms, pumpkin patches that want to be able to fit into that designation. And so we have actually a hearing coming up in a couple of weeks for our lavender farm to officially be able to invite people out here to pick lavender. And you have to notify everyone in your neighborhood, I think within 1,000 feet of your property, give them an opportunity for public comment of how it will impact them, and then specify how many hours a week you want to be open, how many people you're expecting, and make sure you're going through all of the right processes for fire and parking and accessibility and those types of things. And so that's been an interesting process to learn about and navigate as we want to bring people out here. So.
And your neighbors, what have their responses been? Have you been speaking with them?
Yeah, we have a great neighborhood community here. Everybody has about a 40-acre parcel on our street. There's about 12 different properties out here, and we've got a bison ranch. We have a horse boarding place. We've got a guy that has a bunch of sheep and is building swales in his property, in his backyard. We've got some homesteaders. So everybody's very agriculturally minded, and we're in a rural preservation zoning. So this land is supposed to be used for grazing, which is really amazing. And we are very passionate and are becoming activists to preserve the rural land out here. It's not ideal for farming. It's a lot of sagebrush and not a lot of water, but that's why we're trying to find crops that are going to thrive out here and do really well. But there's a lot of development, a lot of business, a lot of people that are moving out into our county. And so I see that prime farmland start to disappear. And it just hurts my heart because we don't have prime farmland where we are.
We are going to talk zoning in an upcoming episode, but as more and more people move from cities to more rural areas, conflicts do come up. This is a really good issue to keep top of mind as you move through life. Farmers need to farm, and more often than not need diversified income streams to do it. You don't have to be a farmer to want to protect our farmland, but you do need to know the consequences of farmland disappearing.
And I don't own that farmland, but I want to protect it. And so that's been a really fun journey just to kind of learn how to do that in an effective way and getting more engaged with planning and zoning and just being aware of what's happening in your community and how it's changing.
The acreage across the country that's disappearing, like under cover of night in some instances where, big businesses are buying it or religious groups are buying it, just taking up a lot of land. It's then being taken offline for farming, which is a problem.
One of my favorite ideas there, if you're going to build a subdivision, I think it would be great to put into county code across the nation that you have to at least keep a couple of acres for farmland for like a CSA as part of that subdivision. And it could be part of their HOA, or you have a dedicated farmer that it's at least doing a garden and vegetables and keeping more of that food local. I think there are ways with policy we could still grow, because we have to grow. That's human nature, but do it in a way that still preserves and respects agriculture too, and the root of that land. It's sad to see that land that has irrigation start to go away.
That's a great idea. That's not offensive to anyone. It's supportive, it's community.
And then it gives people an opportunity that want to farm, maybe an accessible way to do that. It's scary and I worry about that I kind of mentioned I'm getting into more land preservation and activism locally, but if I'm also wanting to pursue agritourism or have an application out, I feel like I have to be careful of how much they see me out there trying to stop development of farmland as well, right? And that's kind of probably a political balance at some point, but it's really important that we do that. The guy that we buy hay from and we buy our steers from has a beautiful piece of property in Eagle, Idaho, and it's just very green and lush. It's very different from where we are, even though it's only 20, 30 minutes away. And it could be developed into more beautiful homes. But we don't realize, the impact of that is all of the people that he sells hay to, and then all of the people that are fed, through those animal and their meat operations. That all goes away and we don't get it back. That land doesn't come back. So it has such a ripple effect in our community. It's not just developing land, but it's taking away access to food too. So I'm really passionate about that. And that's something I never would have thought about when I lived in a neighborhood.
So tell me there's the lavender in the high desert, which is the perfect crop. And then tell me about the animals and how do you go from your other cute little life to this expanded, beautiful version with not only 2,500 lavender plants and then some, but also with livestock?
We're so excited and have so much, just ambition and things that we want to do now that we have the opportunity to do it with this land, that my husband and I don't want to sleep. We're we have to make the most of every season and get the most out of what we can provide for ourselves and for our community. There's so much to learn. We're so excited by all of it. And so we do need to kind of keep it focused, I think, in some ways, but we also need to diversify on the farm as well, because we can't just pursue lavender or just pursue our beef or our pork and be a sustainable farm financially. We really have to have multiple things going on, and we want to be able to produce our own food too. So I have a hard time trying to categorize, am I a farmer? Yes. Am I a homesteader? Yes, in some ways, but not fully. There's all those different labels out there. And I think we're just trying to really be more self-sufficient and also help support our community. So we got into beef. Everybody says chickens are the gateway to farm animals, right? We started with beef. Cattle. We skipped that. And like I said, we're first generation. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have a mentor, but there happened to be a herd of cattle for sale on the property next door to us. And we were really sad at the thought of them going away. We really loved seeing them out on the pastures and everything. And so we said, well, why don't we buy them and we'll learn how to have a breeding herd and beef cattle. any rancher would probably laugh at me a little bit being new. We don't have grass pasture for them. And we bought them in 2021 when the hay prices in Idaho were like double what I was seeing in other states, very, very high. And so we tried to sustain this herd for a while by buying hay. We'd have to buy hay all year round. We don't have enough to feed them. And that was just not going to work in the long run with the numbers. So we've transitioned more to buying cattle from other ranchers that do have grass pastures when they're about 900 pounds, somewhere between 600 and 900 pounds. And then we'll finish them out here on our property by buying the hay and supplementing with grain. And that'll allow us to finish them a lot quicker than if we were going to do 24 months of a grass-fed animal without actually having any grass. But that was one of those, first generation farmer kind of lessons that we had to learn through experience. And I get really nervous to say that because I know there's a lot of, ranches out there that say, 100% grass fed is best. And there's a difference of opinion there. There's different ways you can do it. And we can't provide that where we are. So it's wonderful. And I admire the farmers that do have that option, but it's not sustainable in our climate. So we really had to try and adapt to what we can do. And I always say we're paying for our education through all of this experience that we're getting.
So yeah. You sell your beef to neighbors mainly, or where are you selling it?
So we sell on Instagram primarily. That's kind of how our business has taken off. And I've met the most amazing people in our community through Instagram. Like, oh my goodness, we just have such a great group of people that really care about local agriculture and where their food comes from and knowing their farmer and wanting to come out and see the animals. And so we sell out very, very quickly. Inventory is our biggest issue. It's not finding customers by any means. So we do a lot of beef shares, but we also have started to do individual cuts. And I was just listening to your episode talking about processors and all of the challenges there with custom and USDA and getting a date and all of that sort of thing. So we've learned through all of those challenges of getting on someone's schedule and learning how to speak the butcher processing language, because that is a whole new side of it. One is having the cattle and learning how to raise them and feeding them, but then also knowing how to work with a processor and making sure you're getting the quality back that you want and the dates that you want, and planning that whole process out is just, there's so much that goes into it that I don't think people really realize unless you're kind of doing it.
Now, take me inside that experience a little bit, because I don't know that we've had the opportunity to talk about that, like how you're talking to them, what you're asking for, what you see, how you adjust. How does that work?
I feel like we've been trying to break into the local agricultural market, and that has been anything from finding a source for hay, finding a source for steers when we want to buy cattle, and finding a good butcher and developing those relationships. I've just found that that's a lot harder to do, especially with more established farmers and ranchers that are maybe in an older generation and aren't on social media as such. How do you meet those people? And so for processors specifically, trying to find processors that have dates that align with when your cattle are going to be ready is huge. So everybody likes to process in the fall before winter. It's not fun to break the ice for your cattle and go out there when it's snowing and really, really cold and, going through the holidays and everything. But we have been processing in January because that's when we can get dates. And we've had to work over the last couple of years to establish those relationships with our processors now, where I think if we wanted to, we could get those fall dates, but not starting out, and I think that's something people don't realize when you're buying an animal, or maybe even before they're born, you need to have a processing date for them, depending on your area and how competitive it is. And then just learning about the cut sheets that processors have and filling those out. It's not very intuitive. It's been very intimidating, I think, just to learn that and learn what options are not on the cut sheets that they'll provide you. It's all very different. So like if you wanted to save beef liver, for example, that's not on our processor's cut sheets. And so if you don't ask for it, it doesn't get saved, but it's an option. And so if you're wanting to try and get your whole animal and use it nose to tail, but you don't know what to ask for. You don't know what you don't know. Those are all the things that we've kind of learned through experience. And so one of my side projects that I hope I can get to this year is to try and put out more education on how to approach that with processors so that you know what you're getting and you know what to ask for. And if you don't get the meat cut the way that you asked, how to identify that and how you even approach that conversation, because once it's done, it's done. And mistakes happen. People are human, so that there's lots of different challenges that can come up with processors. But I just have a lot of respect for them in general because there aren't that many. And it's not a profession, that might be the most exciting to get into. And finding staff and employees that really care about that art and that craft of processing meat is really important to our food chain. We talk a lot about the farmer and how great the farmer is and how much we need the farmer, but those farmers need our processors. Otherwise, it doesn't get to our plate. So they're just so important in the process.
The relationship with the processor is everything. And it's super, super important especially when your customers are used to a certain cut of meat in a certain way. And then if it doesn't, sorry to put it this way, but if it doesn't look like the grocery store cut, then they're like, what is that?
What is that?
There's a lot of education for consumers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And then when you get a shared, there's a lot of cuts that you might not use very often, like different types of roasts, or also buco is a great one. I had never cooked that before. I had our own beef shares, but it's just something you kind of learn through. If you don't grow up with it and you don't see it in the grocery store, you don't know what you're missing out on. So it's wonderful, I think, to kind of work directly with farms to source your meat that way, because you learn so much and your eyes are open to a lot of different options out there that you can't find in the grocery store.
Are you able to do that with your customers? Are they already tuned into that?
Yeah, I think that's something I want to do more of. It's kind of a different range. It depends on I think their own personal experience they come to. There's some people that have never bought a beef share before. Like before we started farming, I think my parents bought one once when I was a kid. I don't remember doing that very often. It wasn't something that I had a lot of knowledge about, but I've become educated on it over the last couple of years as we've gotten into it. So there's people that show up in that same way. And then there's people that grew up on ranches and, no longer live on one and know exactly all about it and can tell me. And they're really valuable to learn from and get their perspective. And there's everything in between.
What are your day jobs?
Yeah, so I had pursued a master's in public health, which is a whole other tangent I could go on about education in public health and not learning about the impact of farms to public health and lobbying and big pharma, but I'll save you on that one for now. I work in that industry. I work for the largest healthcare corporation, or the largest health system in Idaho, and I manage their capital plan. So all of our new construction, our medical equipment that we buy, and our remodels. It's just mostly in hospital administration, essentially. And then my husband is a software engineer at a big company here as well. So we both work full time and are very much the weekend warriors for all of our farm operations.
And are you looking for that to shift more to the farm in the future?
Yeah, I think, we've definitely needed our income from our jobs to build the farm. We had nothing here before. So, but getting a tractor and a barn and corrals and fencing and all of the things that it takes to start all of these operations, we couldn't have done without our full-time jobs. And so I think it's going to take us a couple of years to get to a point where we could kind of tip that scale a little bit and the farm could provide enough income for one of us to maybe go full-time with the farm, but it's been helpful to have both. And I think that's another interesting statistic. You might know the exact number on it. Isn't it more like 82% or 83% of all farmers, higher than that? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in the 90s now.
It's in the 90s now? All right. Yeah.
Have an off-farm job. I mean, at least one person. Yeah. And often cited the reason is, well, the income, yes, but also health insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point.
A master's in public health, that's a big ingredient in looking at farms and farming and what you're able to produce there on the farm. Tell me how that influences your decision making and your thought process.
Yeah, kind of going back to 2020 in the field of public health, I've kind of struggled with that a little bit because I feel like there should be a stronger connection between public health and farms that I just don't see. And it was not part of my curriculum in education actually at all. I don't think we ever talked about the impact of farms and healthy food and how it related. And so it's kind of been mind-blowing getting into farming now and learning how much I don't know about providing for ourselves to feed ourselves in gardening, in raising livestock, in weather, and how the soil health and how they all impact each other. That was never part of my curriculum. And so it's just interesting, I guess, to go through all of that education, to have a college degree, a master's degree, and then feel like you know nothing almost, about just really basic survival skills or just life skills that we should all have. So it's been wonderful to just kind of get more tangible hands-on experience by starting the farm and learning all of those things and finding the people that do know that. And I think that there could be a lot stronger connections in public health and in farming to kind of relate those two things, especially in policy. My concentration was in policy, and we didn't talk about preserving farmland as a way of improving the health of the public, or the ingredients that are in our food now, or big pharma's impact in lobbying, the big food, big ag. We just didn't cover that at all. And I just think that's such a miss. So that's not necessarily a criticism of the institution I went to, but I think of just our education system as a whole. We were missing that piece, that link. So I'm glad that I found it now, but I definitely gravitate more to wanting to spend my time on the land preservation and to learning those farming practices and homesteading skills and passing that down to different generations and within our community with the reach that I have.
We're such a fast society that if I eat it and my tongue didn't swell up with a death allergy or something like that, then it's fine. And we're not talking about the long-term effects, right? It's not instantaneous reaction. Then we're not associating this with our health. And we also want to eat what we want to eat and whatever it is. So we don't want anybody to tell us that.
And there's so much that goes into that with the marketing of what we see for the food that's in the grocery store. I mean, all of the labels will tell you what it doesn't contain, as if it's some type of award that they should be getting for not having artificial flavors in it. But what does it have in it? And that's what we should be focusing on is it organically grown? Is it sprayed with pesticides that are going to hurt you? Is it genetically modified? How is your food raised? Why is it good for you? There's a lot of that marketing that's, well, we don't have this, so that must mean it's good.
In all of that is a consumer's power, really, to say, we want to know if there are GMOs. So now there's certification, there's a label. Those labels were not done altruistically. They were done because consumers demanded it. So if you're going to stake your claim on, let's preserve this land, that's an impact that you can have that wouldn't be otherwise. Or if you take your great ideas to Congress and, change how things are done there, all of this is done on the backs of us, of people. And when we lose sight of that and just say, oh, it's all screwed up and I don't know where to start, right?
Or it's in someone else's hands. We really don't have to feel helpless about it when we see things that we want to change. We can take those actions, whether it's just a small one of finding your farm locally or something bigger, of taking an idea to Congress.
Don't underestimate the power of a small farm like Vista Farms. And when you see a small farm in your own community, know that there's more to them than meets the eye. Maybe they too are advocating to protect local land. Maybe they are quietly sequestering carbon in their land without shouting it from the mountaintops. Small farms have a lot more power than you think, and so do you. Without your steadfast support, on relaxed you-pick weekends and on 1,000-person community weekends, they may go under. farming is hard, and they are up against endless expenses, weather and climate shifts, and the threats from industrial agriculture. You keep them going. And you can add your support to the farmers in your community each fall by nominating them for a 4Farmers grant to give them much-needed boost in the right direction, both personally and financially. Thanks for being here as we take a bite out of agrotourism, the sweetest smelling lavender, the various ways that you can raise beef, and the importance of keeping your eyes on how you can protect farmland, including what happens when you don't. One Bite is Everything connects you with farmers like Valerie and other thought leaders who help us all understand the intricacies and complications that come with trying to understand our food. I'm so glad that you are here on this adventure with me. If you like this episode, which I think you did because you're still here with me, please give it a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a written review that invites others to join us for a bite. I would be so grateful. And a shout out of gratitude to all the farmers out there doing this incredible work, and to the OB team. Sonia Dillon for research and editing, and Russell Chapa for sound editing and original music. I'm your host, Dana DePrima. See you next week, right here on One Bite is Everything.